This movie does sound like it hates its own audience.
This movie sucks. This sucks.
Joker 2 felt like a dull, bloated, and ultimately unnecessary movie that failed to answer the question that's dogged it since the beginning. Why does this film even exist?
The musical numbers actually just feel like filler content to try and distract you from how choppy and clusterfucky the movie itself is.
You know, then he falls in love with this Lady Gaga bitch, and they fucking sing a bunch of terrible songs that no one likes.
Especially when you consider that a good chunk of this film is dedicated to try and get the audience to buy into the idea that Arthur and the Joker are separate, like it's a split personality. Like, that's his defense's argument that they try and make to help him out in court. And they really try and make you buy into that idea. They even have like an animation that plays at the beginning of the movie, and that video is supposed to try and, like, I don't know, kind of push you down that thought process. But that is so stupid.
The defense is Joker is another personality inside Arthur Fleck's head. Arthur doesn't know what he did. And I feel like the movie is executed in a way where it wants the audience to humor that idea, to have that mystery of, oh, is that the case? But I was never on that ride because I saw the first movie.
I guess he forgot that he let go of all that and doesn't give a shit anymore and will just murder people. I guess he forgot he did. I guess he forgot that was who he was from the first movie. He just decided, no, now I'm a little timid bitch again.
He is completely regressed into just the old Arthur Fleck, who doesn't have that Joker persona anymore and that, like, confidence or anything.
For most of the film, he's reverted to the same weak, timid Arthur that he was at the start of the first movie. And I can't shake the feeling that there's something almost mean-spirited in that kind of deconstruction, as if they're taking a swipe at the audience themselves for liking someone they weren't supposed to.
I think it actually wanted to suck. Actually, I would say it's quite transparent that the writers and the director of this film didn't really want it to be enjoyed, especially by a particular group of people. The supposedly huge and very loud and annoying social media-based fandom for this film that many film and cultural critics, both professional and amateur, sort of have categorized as being lonely, sad, incel-type men.
This movie does make you think, like, does Todd Phillips regret doing the first Joker movie and he just wanted to do this to undo it? We're in this weird time where studios and filmmakers are like, so let's just troll the fans that actually built this thing up. Hundreds of millions of dollars on their own private joke, their own way to stick it to fans. It's so strange.
He took it in the most unconventional route ever just to be quirky. Like, he took it in this completely different direction and did it terribly.
This movie was always trash.
I wanted to see this movie as soon as it came out, but I didn't really have enough money at the time. So I thought I would delay it for a bit. But then by the time I felt like I wanted to actually go see it because I had enough money, it was already out of theaters. And so I didn't get to see it in theaters. But then it came out on streaming, but it was really expensive. It was like $20 to buy it. They finally took the price down to $10. So I finally bought it today and watched it. And, you know, it's pretty much what I thought it would be. It's pretty much what I expected it to be. And I expected to like it, you know? I thought it was a cool idea when I heard about it. And I thought it could be interesting. And really, the movie gave me no surprises at all. But it pretty much delivered on everything I wanted to see from it. Which it's like the furthest thing from what you normally hear people say about this movie. But I think I understood this movie from the get-go. I understood what the director wanted to do with it when I first heard the concept, which is it'll be a jukebox musical with Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn. As soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, I get it. I know what he's gonna do with this. And he did it, and it's like, yeah, it was a good time. I liked it. I think people couldn't think of anything good, so they were just like, well, I just hope it works. but for a lot of people it didn't. For most people, it seems it did not. I really liked the first one. I liked that it was able to do kind of an older style of movie, really it was a movie that was, there are other films from that time that it references, but Really, I think Taxi Driver is the heart and soul of that first Joker movie. And, yeah, it did it really well, and I like the fact that it was kind of a clever idea. I'm wanting to make a kind of Taxi Driver-ish movie in the modern day. But setting it in that period to make it feel kind of authentic. But then using a very big popular IP in order to get people interested in the movie, which was a really good strategy because it was successful. I think The Amazing Atheist described it as Joker was basically Hollywood tricking you into watching a real movie, which is pretty funny. That's kind of how I feel about it. I thought it was a good story. I loved Joaquin Phoenix in the role of Arthur Fleck, and I liked the way it incorporated the Batman references. I thought it did it really kind of tastefully, in that it's not trying to be a Batman movie, but it's like taking these ideas of characters, these vague sort of ideas of characters, and making a totally different, grounded movie, realistic movie, out of that idea of a world. Like Gotham City in the Batman comic books, as I understand it, it's based on New York, but it's still kind of doing its own thing. In this movie, it's just New York. It's called Gotham, but in every other sense, they even have a Wall Street, and it's called Wall Street. And they talk about, in the sequel, they talk about, oh, she lives on the Upper West Side. So, I mean, it's very clearly being like, oh, and they mention that it takes place in the state of New York, too. Like, it's the state of New York versus Arthur Fleck. So they're very clear that it is New York. And I like that idea of like taking the sort of the comic book dressing, but using it to dress up what's really just our world, what's really just New York City. And that's kind of the design philosophy of these two movies, that like Thomas Wayne, I really love the way they incorporated him, and the way it kind of, they were able to almost sort of comment on Batman without Batman really being in the movie. Of course, the character Bruce Wayne is in that first Joker movie as a child. But yeah, I mean, they were able to sort of comment and shed like a different kind of light on the concept of Batman without making it a movie where Batman is real, because that would break the immersion. That would ruin the movie, because it's unrealistic. Like, Batman doesn't exist in this world, I think. No. It's interesting taking this sort of Batman dressing and applying it to a world where Batman just can't really exist. It was a good concept, and it was executed really well in that first movie, I thought. But the thing is, I really didn't want there to be a sequel to that one, and neither did the director at first. And also, I don't think Joaquin Phoenix wanted a sequel either. I don't think anyone wanted a sequel to that movie, but because it was so successful, they were throwing money at him to greenlight this sequel, and eventually they said yes, and both Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix said yes to it. And I think there's a good reason why Joaquin Phoenix said yes to this project, because I actually think it was a pretty good project. There's this narrative, there's a lot of narratives about both of these movies. I remember when the first one came out, the people with the narrative about it were the weird SJWs on the left who hated the movie before they even saw it, because I guess they didn't like Todd Phillips because maybe he had said something at some point that they didn't like politically. And then there was like some weird, totally manufactured controversy where a bunch of people were writing these articles about how Joker, a movie that hadn't even come out yet, was going to basically appeal to and validate the sort of, the angry young man crowd who, I don't know, these people seem to want to just pretend don't matter at all. Like, yeah, young white men are obsolete, culturally speaking. They aren't. They're clearly not. But it's, yeah, like, we gotta... We can't have a movie that in any way validates their feelings. That's wrong. Very, very silly mindset. But that was how a lot of people were coming into that first Joker movie. This one, I feel like there's the same amount of narrative pushing, but from the other side. It's the people who were fans of the first movie and defended it from those accusations. They are now turning against the second movie because they also have this weird narrative in their head. And the narrative seems to be Todd Phillips didn't want to make this movie, and so this movie is like an insult, an intentional insult against the fans of the first one. And you see, like, there are YouTubers who have said, so many YouTubers have said this. And I'm sorry, but, like, where's the evidence for this, honestly? Because when I look at the things that people are saying about it, like, I don't see what they're seeing. I don't see a director who had contempt for the fans of the first movie and wanted to make a movie to make them angry. I see a director who didn't want to make a sequel to the first movie because it was a movie that shouldn't have a sequel, because it's a gritty, like, old school movie about a guy, a loner, who, you know, has this very swift sort of fake rise and fall arc, much like Taxi Driver. And a movie like that has a really clear kind of start and end to it. It's not an open-ended story, really. It's not something where you finish Joker and you're like, oh yeah, where's this gonna go in the future? No, you finish that and you're like, okay, that was a story and it's wrapped up, it's done. And so he understood that. And so I think what I see in this movie is him basically reckoning with what he made in the first movie and trying to create a new kind of way to advance this story without breaking the sort of immersive realism of that first movie. And that's an interesting kind of way to describe it, because so much of this movie, because it's a musical, is actually actively kind of taking you out of the realism of the situation and making it intentionally unrealistic at times. But there's this understanding that this is a non-diegetic happening with these musical numbers, and because of that, it doesn't actually break the immersion. It doesn't actually break the realism of it. Because you know that it's all a fantasy. And really, the idea of fantasy is key. I think it's the key kind of central theme of this movie, and it's why a lot of people didn't like it, because it understands the truth, which I pointed out, which is that Batman is impossible in this universe, because this is our real world. And so it's recognizing that Batman is a total fantasy, and that likewise the Joker is a fantasy. And this idea of Joker being a fantasy manifests itself in various ways throughout the movie in a way that I think is really interesting. Because I think a lot of people watched that first movie and came out of it with this impression that at the end, Arthur Fleck has become the Joker. Sort of like, you know, that stupid meme of like, oh, this is the moment where Walter White became Heisenberg. Whereas, you know, if you actually watch Breaking Bad, you know that there actually is no moment where Walter White became Heisenberg. And really, I mean, the idea of Heisenberg was always a fantasy. But it's at the same time a fantasy that sort of manifested in real life through his actions. And I think we see the same thing with Joker. In the first movie, he was set up to be a guy who was really sensitive, really shy, and in some ways actually had a good heart and cared about people. But because he felt like nobody cared about him, and everyone in his life treated him horribly, including his mother. The one guy he actually liked was the midget, who we see in this movie in a really good scene. And in fact, even people who hated the second movie liked the part where the midget shows up in the courtroom. And, you know, he kind of, in that courtroom scene, the midget sort of kind of breaks the Joker character because he's the one guy who he ever really liked and felt that he was never betrayed by. He was able to, like, reach him in a way and get to the real him in a way that no one else could. Which was a really great moment. The movie starts with this animated sequence, and you know, it's funny. I don't think that the animation was that good. I like the idea of the sequence, but I don't think the gags were particularly good, and I don't think that the animation itself, the character movement or anything, was very good. Like, you know, another live action movie that began with an animated segment like that is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I love the way the animation looks in that first maroon cartoon intro to that movie. Of course, it's done by one of the greatest animators of all time, so, I mean, you know, you're not going to get that level of quality usually from anyone. But I don't know, I feel like they were trying to replicate specifically like a 1940s style of Warner Brothers cartoon animation. And they just didn't do it very well. The characters had this kind of stiffness. They didn't have enough expression. The line work didn't feel very authentic. Like nothing about it really felt authentic in any way. And so I don't know. I didn't care for that opening very much. But one thing it was trying to do was set up this idea of there's Arthur Fleck and there's Joker. And I think a lot of people misunderstood this, because I've seen more than one person talk about this in their reviews. This idea that the movie didn't what Todd Phillips didn't know what happened in the first movie, which I mean, if that's what you come away with, then I feel like you should take another look at it and think, well, maybe there's something I'm missing. Because clearly the guy made the first movie. He knows what happened in the first movie. He knows that we saw this whole time that Joker was not a split personality. You know, that it was not Gollum. It was not like, you know, sometimes it just takes over him, comes over him. It's that, you know, it was a sort of persona that allowed him to gain confidence in himself, but it was never a split personality thing. That wasn't the nature of his madness in that movie. And I feel like people are really selling the director short on this, thinking that he somehow didn't know what he put in his own movie, and that we're supposed to have this idea that, oh, maybe he is a split personality. I don't think that's ever what he was communicating with that idea. Now, some of the characters in the movie are supposed to be like, Catherine Keener plays his lawyer in this movie, and she's trying to convince the jury of that, which is a total lie. But she's trying to convince the jury of that in order to get him a reduced sentence, at least to get him off of death row. But, he knows it's bullshit, and Harley Quinn knows it's bullshit, and she's like, you're making him look like an idiot who doesn't know he's just some split personality madness comes over him and he can't control himself. He knows exactly what he's doing, and Arthur knew he knew exactly what he was doing, but maybe not in the same way Harley thought. And they had two different ideas about what it was, and I think that's a really interesting aspect of this story. And so Arthur kind of rejects the inauthenticity of his lawyer, spinning this yarn about him that's not true. And he comes to kind of reject the whole yarn that everyone is spinning around him, because he's realizing how much it's kind of damaged him in his life in a way that's too late. It's too far. It's gone too far. There's nothing he can do to turn the clock back now. And so he's trying to escape from it with this fantasy of being in love with Harley Quinn and starting a life with her on the run. And that's the sort of dream, that's the fantasy that's kind of, you know, giving him his confidence that he clearly lost at some point. And one thing that I think the film could have done a better job at was communicate what happened between when he killed the psychologist at the end of the first movie and the start of the second movie. Because it kind of seemed like, when you watch that first movie, it was supposed to end with this sort of idea that that Arthur has sort of become like a Charles Manson in prison, like a guy who just doesn't care and will do what he wants and will fuck anyone over and kill people for fun because he embraces the madness in his life. And so that's sort of what we're left with. And so I can see why people felt kind of jarred with the movie starting him off on a different footing. And I think maybe that is an issue with the film, that it could have done more to explain why. But I think what I took from it when I was watching it was that, he's in prison, and it's a horrible, nasty place, and it can really beat a man down. And you live that for long enough, and you get tired. It just tires you out. It just wore him out. And that was the thing, is I think because there was an implication that at one point in prison he was a lot happier. Because the guards, one of them played by Brendan Gleeson, keep being like, hey, tell us a joke. So there's this expectation that, like, every day he would tell them a joke, and if they thought it was funny, they would give him a cigarette. And that was the sort of relationship he had with them. And I remember thinking at the beginning, like, wow, he has an oddly good relationship with these guards. This is weird for a prison movie, because, I think of Shawshank Redemption, and none of the guards had that good of a relationship with any of the convicts. So I was thinking how curious it is. They seem to like him. And I think that, there's this implication that at one point he was telling jokes every day. And maybe it's the medication that they had him on. I don't know what it was, but it slowed him down. It wore him down. The whole life wore him down. And the loneliness set him in again, and he kind of realized that there is no chaos anymore. Maybe that's it. It's like he was embracing the chaos, but then he gets to prison and it's all just regimented, medicated, sedated, and that kind of freedom that he was originally feeling in his new persona is just sort of... The more it doesn't manifest, the less it really feels real. And especially to someone like him, who he doesn't have the sort of personality of a Charles Manson. Because he always was a bit of a people pleaser, and he always was someone who wanted to be somebody, in a way that, Charles Manson claims, at least, that he never wanted to be anybody. I'm a tramp, a hobo, a bum, a boxcar, and a jug of wine, and a straight razor if you get too close to me. He wanted to be Murray Franklin's, golden boy. That's what he wanted to be. He wanted to be a great stand-up comedian who people could laugh at and could make the world smile. And he wanted, being the clown for the sick kids in the hospital was his way of doing it. But it just, that is his personality, I think, more than anything. And so he doesn't have really that same kind of independence of spirit that someone like Charles Manson had.
Another thing that I forgot to mention that I really like about both the Joker and this new Joker is that Arthur Fleck is really not very smart or clever or talented. And I think that's really important because it really strikes home that idea of the Joker as a fantasy, that this is just kind of a delusion he's living out. He's sort of pretending to be a funny comedian. He's pretending to be a wise ass, but he's not really very good at it. And you see when he's, in the trial and he's joking around as his own lawyer, he's not really very clever or very funny or very impressive really in any way. And I really like the way that I like the fact that they chose to do that with this character, because I think that like the Joker has always been this kind of impressive character in Batman. He's, whether you're talking about Heath Ledger or the original comics or the animated series, whatever it is, you always sort of admire him for his skill and whatnot, whether it be in the joke department or being just a really competent criminal. This guy is really not very competent at all at anything, and that's true to his character in the first movie. And so I think it's kind of weird that some people, watched the second movie, kind of went into it expecting more from him. But I was like, I mean, did you see the first one? Like, he really wasn't very good at anything, nor did he seem to really have much drive in him to get good at anything other than comedy, but he still sucked at it, even though he really wanted to get good at it. So to me, it kind of reminds me of that Marilyn Manson song, "I Want to Disappear," that I reviewed in a recent video, where it's these people who are looking for attention, and they find it in these outlets, but they don't really have anything going for them in those outlets. They're just looking for attention. They just want to feel validated. And I think there's something very human, very relatable about that, and something that really strikes a chord with me just because of what it says about society and about angry young men in particular.
But then at the same time, you have this groupie, like a Charles Manson groupie, Harley Quinn, who sees the persona and falls in love with the persona, and she's really attracted to the Joker persona, but she's not attracted to Arthur. Arthur is boring to her. Arthur is just a normal, mentally ill person. But she wanted something else. She was really attracted to that, I think, that sense of freedom and, undisguised contempt. And so this premise of when we see in the cartoon at the beginning, the Joker is this the shadow of Arthur Fleck. So Arthur Fleck casts a shadow, and the shadow puts on the Joker makeup and kind of plays this part of the Joker. And then when Arthur Fleck tries to kind of, get his suit back, he gets humiliated and embarrassed, and Joker is taking all the limelight. Well, Arthur Fleck is the one who's sort of taking the brunt of that. And I think that's really what the movie's about. Like, it's pretty self-explanatory if you think about it, what I just said. Like, it's not, the movie isn't trying to make you think that he's a split personality and then sort of reveal that he's not. The movie is really kind of trying to grapple with this idea that his persona is this thing that's living a life of its own, and it's actually hurting him. And he originally used it because he thought it was setting him free. He thought it was giving him a life that he couldn't have as Arthur Fleck. But then once he begins to live that life, he realizes that, Arthur Fleck is still here. That Joker might be the mask I wear, but Arthur Fleck is still here, and everything that Joker does is coming back to hurt not Joker, but Arthur Fleck. And he's like, this persona I've created has done nothing but action. It's done nothing but hurt me this whole time. And that's the realization that he has. He really goes through an arc in this movie, and I think that people, I heard people complain that the movie did nothing with this character. That I heard someone called it like a character study that doesn't actually study the character or whatever. But I mean, to me, like, this is a really big development, and it's sort of like, and I think it fits really well with this idea of the fantasy, which is implicit in this the whole concept of Joker, this movie, as like, this is the realistic version of the Batman world. And realistically, Joker just doesn't work. I mean, you know, the closest thing you can have to a Joker character is someone like Charles Manson. But ultimately, Charles Manson went to prison, and he stayed in prison for the rest of his life. He never escaped. And so as much freedom as he sort of felt in his mind, or claimed that he felt in his mind, as much as he sort of claimed that prison is in the mind and that he wasn't really in prison, because prison is just when someone tells you you're in prison. He was in prison for the rest of his life, and he never once made the kind of impact that he did when he was in the free world. Because, you know, once they catch you, unless they decide to let you go, you're done. And there was this question, like, all right, how are they ever going to decide to let this guy go in the movie? Because it seemed like it was a cut and dry case. Like, there was nothing, he had no defense. And he didn't have a defense. They didn't let him go. And there was this sort of brief idea that, oh, maybe he's going to escape when they bombed the courthouse. And it was like, okay, they're kind of repeating what they did in the previous movie. But then it's like he's in the car and he could go into that fantasy. He could keep going into that fantasy, but then he just decides to reject it. He jumps out of the car and he's like, no, this is not going to work. Because if I keep retreating into this fantasy, it's just going to be more pain. And more people are going to get hurt. And he really doesn't want to hurt people, you know, which makes him... I think realistic for the character that they set up. Yeah, and I just like the way the musical numbers sort of interact with that theme, because as I said, they're taking it way over the top. They're intentionally sort of making a pageant out of it. And that really just serves to remind you, I think, of how much of a fantasy all of this is. That the Joker story of the first movie was kind of just the power fantasy of the depressed, mentally ill loner. And it gets enacted a lot in our world. People end up going out and killing people, and they think that they're taking out their rage on society and punishing society. It's all a story that's being told, you know. It's a story that's going on in their heads. When you look at the truth of what's going on, nothing good is going to come of that kind of behavior. So all these people he's inspiring in this movie, he just feels like he doesn't really have anything in common with any of them. And that's something I loved about the first movie too, is that was a big part of that movie, was how it was sort of like that Forrest Gump thing where people project all this stuff onto him. And they make him into this political symbol that it's about the corruption of Gotham because he killed the Wall Street guys. But really, he was just mad that day. You know, it had nothing to do with the politics, really. Even though it was related in some degree because of the problems that were affecting him due to the government shutting down the mental health services that he was using, and just all the other ways that the social safety net was failing him and failing the people around him, which was causing them to attack him because he was an easy target. But he wasn't intellectualizing all of that. And he didn't have a statement to make about it other than what he said to Murray, which is that people are just so mean to each other. And I feel like I have to take this anger out somewhere because all I'm getting is shit my whole life. People are just being mean to me all the time. That was the thing he cared about. It was all very much very down to earth, and what was affecting him, it had nothing to do with like a bigger, broader idea. That was stuff that people read into it. And it was intoxicating to be the sort of accidental leader of that kind of idea. But ultimately, I think it didn't serve him the way he thought it would. And because it didn't serve him, And because ultimately his story was all about him. It wasn't about some greater idea. It didn't work for him in the end, and he just felt disillusioned by it. And I don't know, I just feel like people don't get that about this movie. People aren't engaging with the movie the way the movie is trying to engage with us. And that's a real shame. I don't know, it just seems like people take it so personally. People take it so personally when a movie doesn't do what they wanted it to do. The same thing happened with The Last Jedi. I thought that was a perfectly alright Star Wars movie, in the scope of Star Wars, which is not really an amazing series as far as the writing quality goes. It's got some good aspects for sure. I think that The Last Jedi, for its part, lived up to some of those aspects and told an interesting story, a story that maybe you didn't expect everything that would happen. But I don't know, it's like people take it so personally when what they expected to happen doesn't happen. And they take it as an attack on them, like an insult to them. When I think really, people were so mean to Rian Johnson and said that he was contemptuous of the fans and doing this to fuck with them. And it's he wasn't doing it to fuck with you guys. he was just trying to tell an interesting story. He wanted to entertain you. And I feel the same way about Todd Phillips here, is that I think he didn't like the idea of making a sequel to Joker at first, but when he gave it some thought, he was given enough money that he thought, well, with an opportunity like this, it seems like the studio really wants me to make this movie. I'll try something interesting. I'll try to do something interesting with it. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out a way. I'll come up with something to do. And so I think this was a really good effort. Because he was doing something a little bit different. He was advancing the themes from the first movie, but doing it in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect. But when you think about it, it works. It has a logic to it. And there was also Harvey Dent was in this movie, and in the scene where the courthouse blows up, there's a really cool detail where you can see that half of his face was damaged by the explosion, which, he wasn't an interesting character in that movie, but it's kind of a cool Easter egg, and it sort of sparks to mind the idea of possibly there being an interpretation of Two-Face where he gets scarred really early on before he becomes a district attorney. That because there's this kind of cliche with the Batman villains that the thing that disfigures them, the whole event just suddenly turns them into a bad guy. That's what happened in The Dark Knight, and I never liked that whole thing that they did with Harvey in that movie, because it just felt weirdly forced. But I kind of like the implication of there being a Harvey Dent arc somewhere that someone could come up with where he gets scarred actually really early on in his career. And then he kind of has to live with that. And then that sort of sets him on the path to destruction ultimately, even though his career is going up and up in certain ways. That sort of is the turning point for him. Could be a cool idea. And then there's also the bit at the end where there's the guy who kills him, and then he starts to cut his face, implying sort of, well, I guess implying that maybe this guy is the Charles Manson of the movie and might actually become more like the traditional concept of the Joker. I don't really like that Easter egg. I thought that one felt really dumb. And I didn't even notice that when I saw it, because I wasn't really interested in that guy. He was hamming it up with the laughing, and I was like, okay, I'm not interested in you. I'm gonna watch Arthur this whole time and see what he does. But I guess in the background it was blurry, and in the background that's what he was doing. He was cutting his face while laughing. Other people noticed it and mentioned it in their reviews. That's how I found out about it. I wasn't looking at him because I wasn't interested in that guy. And really, I just don't think it was a great idea. I think it probably takes something away from the story. And it kind of takes away from the idea of the Joker as a fantasy. Although, you know, you could see this as just, he's the John the Baptist of Joker. And that the real Joker, the Jesus Joker, you know, is a different character who was sort of born out of the death of him. You know, it could be an okay idea. I just don't know. It feels a little cheesy the way it was incorporated. It kind of gives me the vibe that I got from the Rise of the Planet of the Apes when they kept quoting the old Planet of the Apes, and it's just like cringe. I liked the Harvey Dent Easter egg because it was just, it worked conveniently with the story. It wasn't the focus of the scene, and it was just a little thing in the background that you might miss, and it didn't really matter. This one felt like it really mattered, and I don't really know if I like it because it really mattered, but like what does it do for the rest of the movie? I don't know. It feels a little bit confusing. I don't think that really there's any criticism I've heard of Joker Folie à Deux that I agree with. I think I disagree with pretty much all of the criticisms against the movie that I've heard. Now, you know, I don't think it's like an amazing movie, and I don't know, I think the first movie is still probably a little bit better, but I still really liked it. I would definitely watch it again. I think it would be a fun movie to watch again, especially I liked the songs in it too. I don't really listen to that kind of music very much. Some stuff like the more soul music, like the Bee Gees, they had one of those. I listened to more of that stuff, but the old jazz songs, I don't really listen to that kind of stuff very often. It really works for this setting though. Something about this, even though this is supposed to be the 80s in New York, something about the jazz aesthetic just fits the vibe that they're going for with these characters and all that. I don't know, maybe there's something about like old school New York that fits jazz really well. I do listen to a lot of Tom Waits, and definitely I can hear a lot of where Tom Waits was influenced by that kind of music too, because he kind of made a similar music to that. Yeah, a lot of his stuff is very jazz based, and that's that kind of gritty sort of club sound, and I thought it was good. I liked Joaquin Phoenix's voice, even though he's not, you know, it's not like he technically is all that good a singer, but I listen to Tom Waits, so why the fuck would I give a shit about that? But that's it. Yeah, I kind of wish that I had seen the movie when it came out, but yeah, no, circumstances. I waited. It was worth the wait. I liked it. I'm done with this video. Folie à Deux.